Welcome to Module 4 for the North Carolina Extended Content Standards Training, Universal Design for Learning and Students with Significant Cognitive Disabilities. The information in this module is intended to support teachers in the implementation of the 2017 Extended Content Standards for students with significant cognitive disabilities. This training is sponsored by the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction and conducted by the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies, a unit in the Department of Allied Health Sciences at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. This module will focus on instruction that applies the principles of universal design for learning. The module will focus specifically on the definition of UDL, principles that define it, and applications in the context of instruction for students with significant cognitive disabilities. Most educators are familiar with UDL as it relates to technology, but the definition of UDL extends well beyond the use of technology. As defined in the Higher Education Opportunity Act, Universal Design for Learning is a scientifically valid framework for guiding educational practice that provides flexibility in the ways information is presented, in the ways students respond or demonstrate knowledge and skills, and in the way students are engaged. And it reduces barriers in instruction, provides appropriate accommodations, supports, and challenges, and maintains high achievement expectations for all students, including students with disabilities and students who are limited English proficient. UDL appears more recently in the Every Student Succeeds Act. Specifically, it appears in the section regarding comprehensive literacy instruction that we addressed in Module 2. ESSA makes specific reference to comprehensive literacy and the need to incorporate principles of universal design for learning. Why is UDL so prominent in ESSA? Well, there are multiple reasons. Perhaps most importantly, our classrooms are becoming increasingly diverse. Students come to us with different needs, skills, talents, and interests. The typical curriculum does not address this diversity. In fact, it's full of many barriers and roadblocks, especially for our students with significant cognitive disabilities. As a result, teachers and students are expected to make all of the necessary adjustments. If we truly incorporate principles of UDL, the burden to adapt is placed on the curriculum itself, as well as the standards upon which the curriculum is based. The principles of UDL specify that we should provide curriculum, instruction, and assessment that includes multiple and flexible means of representation, expression, and engagement. Throughout this module, we will explore these three principles in detail and offer specific examples of their application with students with significant cognitive disabilities. In addition to its core principles of multiple and flexible means of representation, expression, and engagement, the developers of UDL from CAST describe three different learning networks that we should be working to engage for all learners. These are called the recognition, strategic, and affective networks. The recognition networks, located in the back of the brain, enables us to identify and interpret sound, light, taste, smell, and touch. For example, when you answer the phone and hear a familiar voice, you can easily tell who it is without having the person give his or her name. In a classroom, the recognition networks are essential to learning. Students are expected to identify letters, numbers, story characters, and any number of things that they can hear, see, and touch. Historically, the recognition networks have been the target of most academic instruction for students with significant cognitive disabilities, as we have focused on the skills we've wanted students to acquire and the most efficient ways to promote mastery of those skills. The strategic networks are located in the front part of the brain and enable us to plan, execute, and monitor actions and skills. The strategic networks work in tandem with recognition networks to learn to read, write, solve problems, and complete a wide variety of school-related tasks. Perhaps because students with significant cognitive disabilities have difficulty with this type of strategic learning and thinking, the strategic networks are often ignored or intentionally bypassed in our efforts to work with students with significant cognitive disabilities. We often provide highly structured and predictable learning environments and classroom routines that accommodate the challenges many students face. However, these practices also make it even more difficult for students to engage and develop their strategic networks. Finally, the affective networks are located at the core of the brain. These networks support engagement and influence motivation. The affective networks help us develop preferences and help us establish priorities and interests. The affective networks help us get to the why of learning. Unfortunately, our practices with students with significant cognitive disabilities often fail to develop the affective networks in the context of learning. We know our students' preferences, and we use those preferences to reward behavior. But that type of extrinsic reinforcement is entirely different from the intrinsic motivation that results when we focus on the why of learning and engage students meaningfully in interactive learning opportunities. How do the principles of universal design for learning relate to students with significant cognitive disabilities? Let's go back to the principles to explore this relationship. First, consider multiple and flexible means of representation. Unfortunately, we have limited views of what it means to present information. We often choose one way and stick with it, whether or not we have evidence that it's helping students learn. Take, for example, the symbols presented here. The words are missing under the symbols to demonstrate the point. As literate adults, having symbols with words makes it appear to be easier to read the text, but take a few seconds and try to read this example. Without the words, it's nearly impossible to decipher what this says. Yet, we're adding these symbols to text because we think it makes it more accessible to our students. But does it? This example would suggest, no, it does not. As soon as the words appear, we can work out what each of the symbols means. But we are not helping students who cannot read by offering these symbols. Furthermore, even when we are just teaching students to read single words, the research consistently shows that pictures make it more difficult for students to learn to read the words themselves. Having the symbols makes it look like students are doing better during instruction because they name the pictures rather than reading the words. But in the long run, students learn to read more words when they're not paired with pictures. This is not to say that symbols do not have a place in the classroom and beyond. The research tells us that we should not use picture-supported text as a way of representing text that might be too difficult for students, but it is clear that we should use symbols to support communication and to support behavior and manage classrooms through visual supports. Rather than adding picture symbols to text, address the need for multiple and flexible means of representing information by providing students with access to easier text like the examples you've seen in earlier modules. Those texts are based on grade-level text, but are written at much easier levels and emphasize different aspects of the longer text in each of the shorter, easier versions. You can also support multiple and flexible means of representing information by ensuring that illustrations support students in accessing the meaning of text. In addition, you might provide simple explanation of concepts that students might not understand when reading or listening to the text itself. Beyond ways to make information in text more accessible, you could provide multiple and flexible means of representing information using videos and other multimedia presentations, through manipulatives, and by offering real-life examples or opportunities that allow students to experience information they may not otherwise understand. Supporting multiple and flexible means of expression is important for all students with significant disabilities, but critical for those who do not use speech to communicate. As we consider multiple and flexible means of expression, we should consider that the standards are much more focused on students being able to flexibly express their understandings and flexibly interact with adults and peers than they are on building consistent responses. This distinction is especially important given that we have a tradition of writing IEP goals that seek 80% accuracy on 4 of 5 days or trials. Our target has always been consistency, but UDL and the new standards help us understand that it's far more important for students to have multiple and flexible means of expressing understandings. For students who cannot use speech to express their understandings, we want to help them learn to use an alternative approach that offers the same type of flexibility their peers have. This means going beyond offering task or lesson-specific response options and working toward well-organized systems of symbolic communication that they can use in multiple and flexible ways across purposes, environments, and people. There are a number of ways to organize this shift, but for the last 3 years, the Center for Literacy and Disability Studies has been approaching the shift through Project CORE. This project, funded by the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Special Education Programs, is resulting in a complete implementation program that you can access at project-core.com. Core vocabulary are the words we all use every day. Core vocabulary is supported by years of research. Study after study shows that about 85% of what speaking individuals say every day can be expressed with approximately 250 to 350 words. For our students with significant cognitive disabilities who do not currently have a symbolic means of communication, this is excellent news. We can get them started with a small set of powerful words. Taking a core vocabulary approach allows students to be more flexible from the beginning, while building a foundation that can transfer to most commercially available augmentative and alternative communication devices and apps that they might use in the future. The specific set of words used in Project CORE is called the Universal Core Vocabulary. These words have been prioritized based on their usefulness in the classroom and academic contexts. This set of universal core words is intended to serve as a foundational set of vocabulary that could be used with any student who does not already have a comprehensive communication system. Listed here alphabetically, this small group of 36 words were selected because they apply across so many different teaching situations. These are words that teachers can demonstrate and students can use across their entire day, not just in one activity or one setting. The universal core vocabulary are represented by symbols to support access and use by beginning communicators. For example, the universal core vocabulary are shown here with picture communication symbols by Mayor Johnson in a layout with all 36 on one page. We recognize that core vocabulary words and the symbols that represent them are conceptual and abstract. The fact that these words are not concrete with single meanings is what allows for their flexible use across multiple purposes, environments, and partners. For example, the symbol of a green arrow to represent the conceptual word go is abstract. However, the opportunities to teach this word and the symbol in meaningful context throughout the day are nearly endless. Consider the number of times you and your students go during a typical school day. Consider the number of activities that involve making something go. Consider how often characters in books go somewhere. All of these interactions provide opportunities to teach the word and symbol for go in useful contexts. Core words are not limited to a single lesson or activity. They generalize across all lessons and activities. For far too many years, We believed that students had to understand more concrete representations using real objects or photographs before we taught them other types of graphic symbols or written words. What we now understand is that this idea of a symbol hierarchy is not supported by research. Instead, the research suggests that students learn to use the symbols they are taught. Therefore, in Project Core, we begin with abstract symbols and maximize opportunities for teaching and learning in multiple and flexible ways across the school day. For example, compare the pronoun it, which is a core word, to the name of a specific thing, such as earth, which is a content-specific word that has little use outside of discussions about our planet. Think about how often each word could be used throughout a typical day. While earth might be something discussed during a science unit or after reading a particular book, earth is not likely to be used in many other activities. In contrast, the word it is used frequently across contexts. A student could use it to refer to the earth as well as other nouns in different lessons and different activities. Or consider the use of the word he to refer to important characters in books as an alternative to teaching students to identify symbols that represent specific characters. Students and teachers can talk about the characters using combinations of core words such as he can, he help, he good, or he do, and even more complex constructions such as he do good and he make different. Interactions with students can go far beyond symbol identification that usually start with teacher requests to show me or point to. These identification tasks provide little insight into what students know or want to communicate about a topic. In contrast, core words have the potential to allow students to initiate and respond in novel ways. Access to the Universal Core vocabulary may be provided on a communication app or speech-generating device, in the form of a print-based communication board or book, or through 3D symbols. There are print-based formats available from the Project Core website. These are intended to serve as a starting point if students do not already have access to an AAC system that includes the words in the Universal Core vocabulary. An online selection tool is available to help teachers or teams choose an initial format that best meets each student's motor and sensory needs. In addition to the downloadable resources, the Project Core website has professional development modules and other resources to help you get your students started in learning this flexible approach to expression. So far, we have discussed the first two principles of UDL, multiple and flexible means of representation and expression. The final principle of UDL is multiple and flexible means of engagement. This principle addresses the ways we recruit and maintain a student's interest in a learning activity, and it is focused on creating learning opportunities that are interesting enough that students engage because they want to learn, not because they want to receive a reward, a favorite activity, or some equivalent of a gold star when they are done. Multiple and flexible means of engagement requires teachers to offer instruction that promotes participation in learning, focuses on application and use, and changes frequently enough that student engagement can be recruited and maintained. For many, this will take time, as our approach has been dominated by first-then approaches and external rewards that have allowed us to get students to do what we want them to do, but we have failed to help them see the value of engaging in the lessons and the activities we plan. We will pause the module so that participants complete this activity. Please find the handout titled Sample IEP Goals. This concludes the module. However, please note that there are 3 additional modules available that address other aspects of the new 2017 Extended Content Standards. They are Process Change in Tools, English Language Arts Instructional Implications, and Mathematics Instructional Implications. Thank you for your participation. If you need additional information or have questions, please contact Matthew Martinez or Dreama McCoy at the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction.